Okay, so now when it comes to our space unit, we're not going to be tested on our exam for all the sections we did. I kind of cut out a little bit here, so let's go ahead and check this out. So space review. So I want you to focus on a couple of things when you're studying for this part of the exam. Firstly, should really be your definitions. There were a ton of definitions in this chapter here in this unit, so make sure you're well aware of the definitions. Next thing is there are a couple of diagrams. There's a sun diagram and a diagram about the seasons and how they happen, so make sure you're aware of those diagrams. And lastly, I want you to know what's actually in our solar system and what's in the sky, and maybe even, I guess, a little definition along that. So 1 and 3 are fairly similar. Now, as I mentioned, that not every section that we went through is going to be tested on. I cut a couple out. So 8.2 is about the telescopes. I cut that out. And I also cut out the stuff on people going into space. That was our chapter 10 stuff. So don't worry about that. So the sections you will need to know, and there actually ends up only being 6 of them. Firstly is the night sky, then the moon, the inner and outer planets. That'll be a major focus for us. Stars, our sun, galaxies. I guess there's more than 6. Motion in our solar system, and the seasons. So just taking a brief look at each of these sections of what we should expect. So when it came to our night sky, this was really just kind of an introduction. So it talked mainly about the difference between a planet and a star and the stars. You know, stars give off their own light. Planets reflect light. Talked a little bit about a dwarf planet in this section and what asteroids were. And one other thing it covered was the definition of the galaxy, like the solar system, the galaxy, and then the universe. So universe being everything that has ever existed. So again, mostly that section is just definitions. Jumping ahead to the moon, not that this was the order we did it in, I want you guys to be familiar with the layers of the moon. So if I have a picture on there, you'll know what they are. And then a quick little understanding of the definition of the Maria craters and the mountains. Hopefully you know what a mountain is. And then you can even mention or be aware Neil Armstrong being the first to walk on the moon. We didn't really get a lot into other than, in terms of astronauts, really he's about it, maybe Buzz Aldrin. But we didn't really get a chance to delve into that very much. And of course, humans apparently are returning to space, or returning to the moon in the next 5 years. Setbacks pending. Okay, 8.4 is kind of a big one because well, it was really a couple of days we spent on it. So firstly, I want you guys to at least know the order of our planets in the solar system, starting with Mercury and working your way out to Neptune. And we did a couple of charts that if you still have those handy, those printouts with all the information on it, that'll be good because it'll tell you about the length of the days and the length of years. And it also went into some general facts about each planet. So the type of question I'm probably going to ask is something along the lines of maybe a matching question where I say, you know, what is the red planet? Which planet has Olympus Mons on it? Which planet is man going to visit first? And what's the biggest planet? What's the smallest planet? Which one revolves oppositely? So just going over those 2 worksheets will probably be quite helpful for this part of the exam. We looked at stars. So this was outside of our solar system, but knowing about light years and absolute magnitude and such. And then this picture, I'll make sure that it is included on the exam and some questions about it. And really it just talks about, you can see that on the left side here, we've got kind of our, hang on, I'm just turning my pen on. On the bottom here, we've got our surface temperature. And then we also have the color sequence. So you can see that when you have a planet that is blue, it's going to be on the hotter side. And when we end up planets with yellow and red, we're going to be on the cooler side. Okay, those sort of go together. And then you can see that we also have planets in terms of our absolute, like our dimmest ones and our brightest ones. So I'm probably going to ask some questions about this. Our sun. So we did a diagram during that day. The diagram is a little more in depth than this one I put on here, but it talks about the photosphere, you know, being your surface, and then your chromosphere, the atmosphere, corona, different parts like that, radiation and convection zones that would be inside. You also got your core there. And also knowing about the difference between solar flares and solar prominences. Those are the explosions that happen on the sun. So it's a good chance there's going to be a diagram included on our exam of the sun. And to round out chapter 8, we have our types of galaxies. And this one's a good possibility too. So we've got our spiral, that's our Milky Way, that's the one we're in. You know, we're about like right here-ish. And then you got your other galaxies. Of course, we can see these because of the Hubble Space Telescope. Making our way into chapter 9, there were a couple of things. The first thing we did in that section was we talked about the heliocentric and then the geocentric, and that was having the sun at the center of our solar system. And this was having the Earth at the center. And this was sort of man's first belief, was that Earth was at the center. This turns out to be wrong. And of course, we find out that the planets revolve around the sun. One other thing that we sort of covered earlier that was really this part of our textbook was it talked about asteroids, meteors, meteorites, comets. We did spend a whole day on other objects in our solar system. I think we also talked about the belts of the solar system, the Kuiper and the asteroid. We talked about the Oort cloud. So there was kind of a day, and it sort of rolled into this section where we just looked at things that are out in space, dwarf planets and different stuff like that, some moons too on other worlds. Okay. Then the latter part of this section talked about rotation of a planet and sort of what that leads to, you know, day and night, and also talked about revolution and talking about the length of a year. So essentially how these planets are moving, I guess, within the geocentric model. And to wrap it up, the last section is the seasons. So we got to know about the tilt of the Earth when you draw the Earth and you draw your equator and you got that tilt. And what is that? 23.5 degrees Celsius. And because of that tilt, you get the seasons happening. Well, I just drew over it. And so I want you guys to know about your seasons and know about your equinoxes and all this important stuff here. And yeah, so again, there could be a diagram on that. So those are the sections that I will be covering on this exam for you guys. So make sure, well, it's really up to you how you're going to study this. Just stopping the recording.